live, ladies and gentlemen. We are the Millie Goats. We are back for a special edition bonus episode Tuesday night sports stream. Usually we go on Wednesdays and Sundays, but we're going to try to be putting out more stuff. And you think that this thumbnail is absolute clickbait. I can see it in all your faces for those of you watching and possibly listening, and you are dead wrong. This is not a slander Mahomes episode. This is Mahomes was not number one. How is that possible? Do we agree? I don't know. So the other guys off tonight. So we are joined by Chiefs super fan. I wouldn't say quite as much as Chiefsaholic. I don't think you've robbed any banks recently. Have you? But Jens here at Jens Christensen also works with Roto Baller. You can see it down there in his thing. It says Chiefs Kingdom Goats. So how are we doing? Thanks for joining, Jens. You got me?
Absolutely. I'll go ahead and Chiefs Kingdom tonight. I can't let my boy Mahomes go down without a fight at least. Yes, I mean, not quite. The Chiefs super fan. I'm not in jail or anything like that. I didn't rob any banks and try to escape on a bike, so I'm not that cool. Yeah.
But you're feeling good. You're a big Mahomes guy. You're a big Chiefs guy. We always have banter in the chat. We have banter in the comments on Twitter, things like that. And this will be a rivalry that never dies until the 49ers, my favorite team, extinguish the demons that are the Kansas City Chiefs and save the NFL world from all of this absolute ridiculousness that the Chiefs have caused. So until that happens, we will continue to be bitter rivals.
Yeah. Oh, exactly. Say 49ers Chiefs, good rivalry. You know, we took Steve Young from you. I think Chiefs had it. We were bad for a while you guys were real good, but Chiefs Chiefs all the way.
Absolutely not. Never. Okay. So this is not clickbait. This is actually a very in-depth presentation where I prepared 5 substantiated reasons, or I guess reasons why he was not number one. So we're gonna pull up the thumbnail here, and this is the original thumbnail. So we have Patrick Mahomes in the NFL top 100. Was voted number 4. Hold on, Jens. I can hear my voice in your background. Is that me or you?
Yes, I was a little delayed there.
Hold on, Jens. I can hear my voice in your background. Is that me or you?
That's me.
Oh, okay. Okay. All right.
I may need to reconnect. I'm a little delayed and I can hear you twice. So give me just a second. I'm going to pop out
that's fine.
if that's all right.
Okay. Back out, dude. No worries. All right. So Mahomes, number 1, not so much. The big thing with this was that I don't understand how this possibly could have happened. As just like most of the other sports world, sports media, whatever. But I do have 5 reasons because I'm one of those people. It was curious where it looks like I'm trying to dog Mahomes and the Chiefs, and I'm not. It was more of I am genuinely curious about this, of like, how could all of this have happened? The NFL top 100 is obviously voted on by the players. And so everybody took that, ran with it, and said, oh my gosh, he's, the players are out to get him, the this and that. And it's like, when you start looking at the data, not the case. And you can put a case together, unlike all of the professional sports media, the big wigs who get on there and pound the table. There he is. He's back. You good?
Yeah. I left my YouTube page open just to make sure I could hear your voice twice. It's so nice they made me hear it twice, I guess.
I was just getting into, like, my biggest problem with all this is that we have all the major sports media getting up there and listing off all of his accomplishments and how he couldn't be number 1. It's a slap in the face, blah, 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 pounding the table, tell him it's a fatigue factor from the players, from the fans. Don't look at the stats. Everyone is, you know, mad that Mahomes is number 4, yet Lamar, who everybody the same people were telling us that Lamar was the unanimous MVP, are now backtracking and say, "How could Lamar be ranked ahead of Mahomes?" And it's like, well, 3 months ago, you told us that, or 6 months ago, you told us that Lamar was the unanimous MVP, and he's a two-time MVP, and it's the race is over, yet he's ranked ahead of Mahomes for this season. And then you come back and say, how could Lamar be ranked? I'm like, well, Nick Wright, you just told me a few minutes ago or a few months ago that Lamar was unanimous. It was not even questionable. And now you're saying, well, Lamar shouldn't be ranked ahead. It's like, this is the jargon that these jabronis play and speak down upon us as fans and people who have small shows. And I'm not going to stand for it. So I was like, you know what? Let me educate you, Nick Wright, and all you people who just get up there and yell at how could this happen, this and that. So what do you think about that, dude?
Yeah, I mean, I know you're the football guy, so I mean, maybe you could tell me a little better than I can. And look, I don't know exactly what they put into number one. Maybe it's overall encompassing number one. What is it? Because I mean, look, Lamar Jackson, amazing. Look, he runs hot. Can run. He does it all. He's got a great receiving core. I think you had posted something on Twitter maybe a week or so ago about the greatest rushing quarterbacks or dual threat quarterbacks is what it was, and I asked the question: does Mahomes count as a dual threat quarterback? And I looked. Of course, I immediately checked Football Reference. For his rushing stats, how many rushing touchdowns does he have? How many rushing yards? Things like that. Wish I could rattle it off at the top of my head, but I mean, he was nowhere even close to Jalen Hurts or Lamar Jackson. And one thing too that I think that the Chiefs have done at least a really good job of is, I mean, we had Tyreek Hill, not got rid of him, but traded him. So our receivers, we had an up and coming receiver core. So I think that it just kind of flows where Mahomes isn't going to those necessarily hit those top tier numbers every single year in and year out, whereas somebody like Lamar Jackson can really air it out and then run just kind of based on the scheme that they play, things like that. But really for Mahomes, for the Chiefs to do what they do, which is win Super Bowls, Mahomes just needs to be near the top 10. So for me, I can see maybe what Nick Wright's saying, but I'm not sure exactly what goes all into their number one or what goes into their rankings.
Well,
What are your thoughts on how their
let's
rankings are
go over that,
explained?
because that's everybody.
Okay,
How could you put
perfect.
the two-time? How could you put the this and that in it? It's like, well, the players wouldn't just do that, right? We all know. We're all very aware that he has won 3 Super Bowls and it's a two-time MVP. So
Right.
it's not, it couldn't be that simple that they were just, oh, he needs a chip. So let's go reason number 1. The voting for the NFL Top 100 takes place from Thanksgiving during the season to New Year's. That right there, when I looked that up, I was like, whoa. And that started me down an entirely new path of like,
Okay.
well, I wonder what happened. And I have all these slides. I prepared a very in-depth. I went on a deep dive one night when everybody in my house went to sleep, and I basically was like, okay, well, that's interesting. Can we find the statistics? So I went through every individual game. I looked up his statistics, and that got me kind of intrigued about, okay, well, can we compare those to past seasons? Oh, yes, we can. Oh, yes, we
Yeah.
can. Can we look at the MVP voting on these dates or somewhere in this range? Oh, yeah, we can. Yes, we can. So, and that's when it got really interesting, is to seeing how this got justified by the players. So the first thing is, not all the players vote. And the players hate this. They absolutely hate this stupid drill,
Yeah.
and here's why.
So
Here's how it
yeah,
all
so
goes
go ahead.
down. From an article by GQ Sports. Voting happens during the season, typically from Thanksgiving to New Year's, when it's clear which players have separated themselves from the pack in a given year. O'Toole and Campen go into the locker rooms at the facilities with paper ballots asking players to rank their top 20 guys in the NFL. Quote, we hand them the ballot, we hand them the Sharpie, they get to do it themselves and hand it right back to us. A lot of these guys have seen our faces year after year. They'll say right away, it's top 100 time, isn't it? So there you go. That's how they get the information. And the players hate it, and they only go for a month out of the year, right? So
Yeah.
not every player gets to vote. About 1,000, I think, do now, but they're not given any direction of who to vote for. It doesn't have a set number of spots allocated for positions, or offense or defense. That's why you see guys get left off.
Uh,
They'll leave extra ballots behind, so players who may have missed still have a chance to cast their vote. Uh, stuff like that. So there's step number one is to calm everybody down. The voting is only 1 month out of the year, right?
so a very small window, and as we know, NFL, huge variance. I mean, from week to week, if you just look at it game by game, things like that. So if you break that down to 1 month in I mean, 17 game season, I mean, it's such a small sample size, where something like baseball, even if you took a
Yeah,
month in baseball, I mean, you still have so many more games, things like that to kind of evaluate a player. And another question is, how do they choose the guys that get to vote? I mean, what are they taking the top two, three from each position? I mean, I know you said 1,000, so obviously it's more than that. But
yeah,
again, it just seems like a small sample size of people that are voting.
right. And that's it's a very small sample size. So right there, like everybody should just calm down and take a collective breath. Like they put out the fancy graphic, the top 100. They make a big deal about it. They do it on NFL Network, voted on by the players. So if you disagree with this, you're saying that the players don't know ball, basically. They're the ones that are submitting the ballots, and everybody's like, who made this list? This is dumb." Like Nick Wrights and Colin Cowherds and all these guys get up there and yell at whoever was responsible for this, and it's like, well, you're yelling at the NFL players, and I think that they would have a little more say, and I'll get to that later. Um, but yeah, it goes back to they throw out all these. It's the fatigue factor. It's like, no, these guys are playing a season. They're in the middle of a playoff race, and somebody walks in with a piece of paper and a Sharpie and says, rank your top 20. They're going to be like, okay, sure. You know,
Yeah.
like, so okay, so we have that. We have that as in the bag, right? That's reason number 1. Reason number 2 is that obviously because it's only 1 month out of the year, they're asking players to completely ignore everything else that has happened prior to this month because they come out with a new list every year, which means this isn't the greatest top 100 of the decade, right? That would be an entirely different study. This is the
Yeah.
best for this past season, 2023. We know that Mahomes is a 3-time Super Bowl champion. We know that he is a 3-time Super Bowl MVP. We know
Yeah.
that he is a 2-time MVP of the league. But the voting was in before the playoffs started. It's easy to look back and be like, how could you put the 3-time Super Bowl champion at number 4? And it's like, well, because the voting was done before the new year even started. Like,
Right.
that didn't even matter. Like,
Yeah, I mean those playoff wins, as we mentioned. Again, I can't remember who it was on Twitter that compared Dak and Mahomes. Their stats and how, I mean, they were kind of similar, but it looked like Dak was better statistically. But again, when you just take that small snapshot, it's kind of like, well, yeah, when you really look at the parameters for voting, again, during that window, maybe he was the fourth best. I don't know.
right. So it's starting to make sense as to how this happened, is it not?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, definitely.
So that's the whole point of this video was like, I'm not here to, I mean, again, I'm not here to rip him a new one and be all controversial. Like, I'm here to be like, like when you look at how the process goes with the voting for the NFL Top 100, and then you start to look, and we're going to get into the numbers here soon. And this is just it just solidifies this for me, is to be like, okay, here's what happened during that time from other players. Uh, so we'll get into that in a second. And then he also, at this point, it says the worst stats of his career, and by all accounts, I have a page pulled up that we will bring up whenever we get to his season total stats. I'll show
Yeah.
you comparatively to his other stats that he's had when he's putting up freaking video game numbers, you know? I mean,
Yeah, which is why he was. Oh, go ahead.
As a Chiefs fan, you were watching this being like, okay, well, this is not what I'm used to. Honestly, or will you be like, hey,
Exactly.
we're
Yeah,
you know,
definitely. We're used to being the top dog, baby.
mhm,
And just taking a quick glance on ESPN, from November 20th, which I realize is just before Thanksgiving,
that's what I went.
November 20th to December 31st, the Chiefs went 3-4. So again, to be the number 4 player, if you could tell me he was the number 4 ranked player during that 1 month span, I'm actually kind of impressed too, especially for a 3-4 team. Anytime you think
Interesting you
about,
should say that.
yeah, yeah, leads me right into my next slide.
Oh, his records and his stats during the voting. You don't say. Look at this. I've got all the opposing quarterbacks that he was playing, right?
Yeah,
I've got the team record down there. I've got his stats tallied up for those 7 games. I've
yeah,
got their win-loss record. I've got the scores. And I'm like, okay, so we're in the middle of the playoff hunt here. And the Chiefs, like you said, went they went 4-4 technically, but he didn't play the last game. But while
yeah,
he was playing, the Chiefs lost to the Eagles and Jalen Hurts, who was in the MVP conversation.
definitely.
Jordan Love and the Green Bay Packers, who flirted with the MVP conversation.
And
And then
love
he
to sign
lost to
the
Josh
biggest
Allen.
contract.
Yep. And then he lost to Josh Allen. So he was 1-3 whenever this voting process started. And at that
Yeah,
point, they finished what? Would they finish 10-7
yeah. Let's just double check here. I think so. 10-7. Yeah.
or 10-6
Um,
maybe?
I think
I
ten and
think they
six.
finished ten
Actually,
and
I think
six.
you're right there.
So at this point, they won 1, 2, 3, 4. So they were 6 before this stretch started. They were 6-3 or something. I don't something like
Yeah.
that. 6
It,
and 2, or I don't know. But
it definitely
anyways,
wasn't the start that most Chiefs fans were hoping for, especially when we lost to Detroit at home. Who's another
yeah,
great team. But can I ask you a question too? Is there anything that sticks out to you looking at that slide there? Because I can tell you, for me, one thing that does stick out also is look at the quarterbacks that he lost to. Uh,
exactly.
Easton Stick, not going to be a starter. Jake Browning, not going to be a starter. O'Connell, who obviously not going to. I'm not going to say obviously not going to be a starter, but may not be. And then Zappy, probably not. Yeah,
Yeah. So that he beat O'Connell, he beat Zappy, he beat Browning. Stick he didn't play against. And
yeah,
he lost to Jordan Love, Josh Allen, Jalen Hurts, and Aiden O'Connell. And that was the game where it was a debacle. So it was
right.
like he's losing to the guys that are in the MVP conversation. And the NFL made a big deal about quarterbacks playing quarterbacks. It happened to Brock Purdy and Lamar Jackson. The Ravens beat the wheels off the Niners, and they're like, well, Brock Purdy's MVP candidacy is over. So they were doing this thing this year where they hyped up these quarterbacks playing each other, and it was like the MVP match. And so he lost these games because that's what they were doing in the NFL this year.
Yeah, exactly. And I guess I had it backwards when I said lost to
Oh,
Easton Stick, things like that. I meant that the quarterbacks he
mhm.
lost to was just like what you were mentioning. Basically,
Yeah.
the other guys that are competing with him for that MVP, award and nomination there.
Yeah. And so you look and it's like, okay, lost to the Eagles, lost to the Packers, lost to the Bills, and they beat some mediocre to bad teams going down the stretch. So everybody who's voting, all the players are like, Well, he keeps losing to all these other players that are in the MVP race, and I have another slide after this, as you
Yeah.
will
And
find
not to
out.
mention another thing that I just wanted to point out too was that loss to Philadelphia was at home on the 20th. It was a Monday night game. We
Yep,
lost to Buffalo at home also, and
yep,
we lost to Oakland at home as well. So three of those lost. I mean, they were at home too, which
yeah,
is supposed to be the fortress, the Chiefs' kingdom.
yeah. And then you look at his numbers during that stretch. He's 65%. He only threw for 300 yards one time, right?
Yeah,
Okay. And then he threw for 248.7 yards per game. And then he only threw for 10 touchdowns, 7 interceptions. And I said, I wonder what he did during that time last year when he was the number one player.
yeah,
Well,
that's a great question. 'Cause, I mean, another thing too that stuck out to me was that in only three of those games he didn't throw an interception.
there you go.
Um, so that again, I'd love to see the comparison year over year.
Oh, I have it. I have it on
Oh,
my phone
perfect.
ready.
It
I
leads me
wrote
right
it
to my
down.
next slide.
So in 2000, no, I don't have it on a slide, but in 2022, when he was the top player in the NFL, he had 300 yards passing. He did that 5 games during this stretch, the same stretch, November 20th to Christmas
Oh
or
wow.
whatever it is. 300 yards passing 5 times. He had 3 passing touchdowns 3 times during that stretch, and he only threw 5 interceptions, but he had 17 touchdowns passing. So he had 7 more touchdowns. He threw for 300 yards 5 times, and he had 3 games where he threw for 3 touchdowns, and he threw for 3 touchdowns 0 games during
Zero.
this stretch. So I looked all that up. Like I'm telling you, when I say this was not a slander, I was genuinely curious of like, what were the other players voting on this thinking? And they're sitting there watching him throw for 177 yards, 210, 235. And they're like, like that's not number one. Meanwhile, you've got, CJ Stroud just throwing the ball all over the place. Lamar, his team's beating the wheels off everybody.
Yeah.
And, you know, it was what it was during that time. So now let's get to the next one. Reason number 4 were his season total statistics, which I made a chart out of. And so over the
Chart looks
collective,
great, by the way.
so over the collective of the year, his yards, he was 6th in the league. His completion percentage was 9th. His yards per game, he was 8th. His touchdowns for the season, he was 8th. Interceptions, he was tied for 3rd. Rating, he was 14th. Touchdown percentage, 15th. Interception percentage was 9th. So he wasn't burning the league up. And then everybody, oh, he didn't have any help. He did it. Okay. What? Great. I understand that. But still, it's like that factors into him putting up these numbers. You can't ignore that. I hate the argument of Lamar Jackson is playing above the numbers. I'm like, no, he's playing what his numbers say he's playing. Mahomes was playing what his numbers say he was playing. He was playing as a top 10 quarterback, not the best quarterback. Now you could argue the immeasurables or whatever but you look at some of the guys in those categories, like these are the above and below. So for yards, he was below Purdy and above Love, or those are the guys that were in the range. Completion percentage was Lamar and Goff in that same range. Yards per game, Allen and Stafford. Touchdowns, Russell Wilson and Baker. That's who he was with. 14 INTs. That's the same as Trevor Lawrence and Tua Tagovailoa. Rating was in the same category as Baker Mayfield, Derek Carr, Jared Goff. His touchdown percentage was the same as Carr and Herbert's. His interception percentage was the same as Dobbs and Stafford. So he's like playing. These are the guys who he's in. That's the stats he's in. Like that's like when you look at the stats, that's where he's at. Like
Which I mean, it sounds like, I mean, from just because of what we've come to expect from Mahomes, if it's not first, you're last, as Ricky Bobby
yeah,
once said. But when you look at that list, for me at least, Purdy, went to the Super Bowl, great quarterback. Love just signed one of the biggest contracts. I think the highest paid quarterback now. I mean, Josh Allen, Matt Stafford, still maybe he's not quite the same quarterback that he
Stafford's still good.
was. He's still good, just maybe not where he was as far as slinging the rock. But still, look, the list of quarterbacks, generally speaking, here is that those are still all playoff contenders, in and out. I mean, Super Bowl favorites when you look at the beginning of the year are teams that are up there as far as perennial picks for potential Super Bowl champions. So I think that, again, back to my earlier point about Mahomes needs to really, he doesn't necessarily have to be, in first in all those categories for the Chiefs to do well. And I think that speaks to how well Andy Reid and Brett Veach do as far as putting together the full team. So I think that Mahomes really is just, I mean, one piece of the wheel, one cog in the wheel, as they say. And that's what makes him great in my mind. Again, maybe that's, as you spoke earlier to, is the intangibles.
Yeah, it's the intangibles. Like you can't argue against that. Oh, here we go. What's going on? What is going on? We're just
What's
going
up,
over some.
Jordan?
We're going over Mahomes. This is not slander, ladies and gentlemen. This is just presenting data to justify in actual numbers, not people getting up there and giving their opinions and their subjective data, all these immeasurables. That's
Yeah,
great. We know all that. We know that Mahomes and Reed work well and he's a leader and all that stuff. Great. But I can't measure. I don't know how you measure that. I'm just looking at hard data and saying, yeah, that ranking based off of what he did during that time and during this season, it makes sense. So his when you look at his seasons past, he's statistically having. I'm going to stop sharing this just for a second so I can pull up this other one so you can see. So let me minimize that.
yeah.
I'm good.
Well, I think it's also important. The most important thing really is to understand the voting time period, because again, when I saw that, I was up in arms. I was DMing you right away. What are you slandering my boy for Mahomes out here for with this number 4 talk? So
Yeah,
understanding that too it's like, well, hey, actually, when you kind of look at it, it does make it makes a lot more sense. It's still kind of an interesting way to go about things as far as the rank is concerned, just to take such a small sample from the season. But that's kind of supposed to be the peak of the season as you're leading into playoffs. That's when teams are kind of fighting for position, fighting for that seeding and home playoff games. And that's kind of the home stretch.
he wasn't playing during that time. He was not playing great. It's okay to say they were losing games. His statistics weren't where they normally are, what we'd expect. And yes, you can blame the receivers, but the reality is that players view that as there's other guys doing more right now.
Yeah, exactly. 100%. Regardless of anything else, there's other guys doing more. As simple as that.
Yeah, and that's okay. Like, I'm going to get to that in the final slide, but I just wanted to go over this and say, okay, when you look at all of his years, in 2022, when he was the number one, he threw for 5,200 yards, 41 touchdowns, 12 INTs. He threw for 1,000 less yards this year. That is stupid. So you put up those numbers, and then you come out here and throw for 4183, 27 and 14. All of his numbers are down significantly from years past, except for the 2018 year.
His first season as a starter, is that what it was?
Yeah. But statistically, almost every single category, or 2019, excuse me, where he won Offensive Player of the Year somehow by throwing this again. So, but anyways, his completion percentage was up this year, but everything else for the most part was down when you look at his stats. It's like, oh, okay, so his yards per attempt down, yards per completion down, yards per game lowest of his career, rating lowest of his career, QBR lowest of his career. Like, just passing yards second lowest, touchdowns second lowest. So it's not like I'm sitting up here being like, oh, he was terrible. I'm just saying, like, given what we're used to seeing, Like, that's just not, we're used to seeing the 5,000 yards, and we're missing 1,000 yards somewhere. We're missing 15 touchdowns. We're missing, you know, some of these big numbers we're used to seeing. It's like other players are doing this or similar,
Yeah,
So
I do wonder too, looking at that too, the number of attempts that he had was, I mean, lower than it was in 2022, 2021, right in line with 2020. Wonder if that's just because of the adjustments teams made. When we lost to the Bengals in the AFC Championship game at home, it was like we just couldn't do what we did the year before, where we just outgunned teams. So part of me just wonder how much of
yeah,
those.
they had to adjust. There were scheme
Yeah,
adjustments, 100%.
exactly. Yeah,
So there's no doubt about it. So I just wanted to show that. I'm going to bring up the final slide that really solidified this for me. Whenever I was like, "Oh, okay." Thinking about the timeline, right?
yeah. Which
Let's
is
think
important.
about
That's the most important thing here.
Yes, that's why it was the first slide. It was like, the reason this happened is because it was going on during, and you will go back for those just tuning in. This is when the voting took place. He was 3-4, 248.7 a game, 10 touchdowns, 7 interceptions, with losses to all the other teams that were in the race and some of the players that were in the race.
Yeah.
Like,
Which, and again, those are the guys that he's compared to, as far
yeah.
especially the voting goes.
So, and then this brought me to the last slide. Number 5. Reason number 5. The top 5 MVP candidates on Christmas were those, but the most important part is when this whole thing started, he was second behind Jalen Hurts in MVP voting on 11-20. So from when that game, the first Eagles game, again, you saw it. It was Eagles versus Chiefs. They were 1-2 in the poll. And then a few weeks later, Lamar and Purdy were 1-2 in the poll, and Allen was up there. And so they were doing this thing in the NFL where they were trying to get the MVP candidates to play each other. They were lining up the matchups.
Hey, which makes for great games. I was watching every one of them.
Of course.
Yeah,
Of course. So, 11-20, when this first 7-game stretch started, when the voting took place, he was second. And by Christmas, the top 5 was this: Lamar, CMC, Purdy, Tua, Josh Allen.
yeah,
So he played himself. So these voting that the players had, the voting that they had was, they probably were just looking at the MVP race and putting whoever, Tyreek fell out because he was injured on 12-11. But when this whole thing
yeah,
started, he was on pace for like 2,000. Like, he was about to set NFL records when all this
yeah,
started. Like, he was the hottest thing going. And then he gets hurt like right into the voting, and then he kind of fell off the MVP. But this is right in line with Lamar was number 2 in the voting. CMC was number 3. So it's not far fetched to say these guys were looking at the MVP race and being like, "Oh, Tyreek Hill's having a historic year. Lamar is second in voting or leading the voting. CMC's second in the voting." Like, so you look and they just basically, the players were like, "Oh, we're just gonna, you know, uh, we're just gonna go in line with whatever the MVP race is." So it was absolutely in accordance with the MVP, which goes back to my original point of all the people pounding on the desk saying the race is over for MVP, where Lamar has run away with it. And then this voting ends and Lamar's the MVP, and then the NFL Top 100 comes out, and everybody who's yelling for Lamar is now saying, "Well, you can't put Lamar in front of Mahomes." And it's like, "Well, you just told us we could 3 months ago, and now we can't. What are we doing?"
yeah.
Y Like, you all stood up there and yelled at us, pointed your finger down at us, said, "Hey, this thing's over. You guys don't know jack. Lamar's stats, don't look at him. He's the MVP, two-time MVP. It's solidified, and anybody who disagrees is an idiot, and you don't know ball, and you don't know what you're watching. You have to look above the numbers." I heard that a million times. And it's like, okay, well, now these same people are like, "How dare you rank Mahomes below Lamar?" And I'm
which
like,
I'm definitely one of those people. But
right.
I do one thing that I think about is I wonder how much of it comes down to expectation as well. Lamar, what do people always, or what was always said about him as far as, oh, if he could only pass better or more accurately, then the Ravens would be better. And last year he had a great year. They got Zay Flowers, Odell Beckham had an outstanding year.
Yeah.
So again, maybe the expectation for Lamar as far as passing goes was down compared to Mahomes, and this year he kind of blew the top off as far as his expectation goes. But for Mahomes, people are expecting 5,000 yards, 50 touchdowns, and when he doesn't quite hit that, it's like, oh man, Mahomes is just down this year as
Yeah.
far as that narrative goes. So I wonder how much sometimes, I mean, even the players themselves, like how much that has to go into it, because again, like we touched on earlier, even Mahomes being top 10 in those categories, I mean, still outstanding stuff.
Yeah.
Just not to where maybe he was expected to be at or where people expected him to be for the season. So then it's like, well, I can't really vote him number one if I don't think he's doing as well as I had expected, on this from the start of the season.
Yeah. Well, that's the thing. That's what the whole fatigue thing was. Is like, oh, his off years are people's career years, and that is 100% true. Like we're sitting there, he had the worst stats of his career, and he's still top 8 in pretty much everything, right? And so that's 100% true. But at the same time, it's like we've got them pushing the narrative of Lamar to make history. They've got Tyreek on the precipice of history. You've got
Yeah,
Christian McCaffrey on the precipice of history with the rushing
outstanding season
with a touchdown every game for like
every
an entire
game.
year straight. So
Yeah,
like they wanted to push the we're making history stuff. And it's like when you do that, then when Mahomes isn't primetime Mahomes,
making
he's going to
history.
shuffle to the back of that because he's not doing anything historic
Yeah,
until the
again,
playoffs, which does not matter in this case because the voting is over before it starts. And then the other thing was that I had written down was, the players understand that the rankings and awards that come out as a brotherhood, having played football for a very long time and through college,
yeah.
we know, or the players know, especially in the NFL because they're getting paid a lot of money, that number one spot on this list is a negotiation piece for a contract,
Oh,
right?
absolutely.
And it's also an ode to people saying that they're sick of the MVP. The players are sick of the MVP being just a quarterback award. So the players know, okay, if we put Tyreek and some of these other guys up there and they got a contract coming up, they can use this. So they're all trying to get paid, and Mahomes got his money. He's been number one. He's the best quarterback, all that stuff. There's no denying that. But
Yeah, look at
uh,
Brock Purdy, for example. I mean, he's the cheapest quarterback in the NFL. I think, as far as starters go. Was he on 800,000 a year, like still on his rookie contract? And I mean, the guy's taking you what, two Super Bowls? Well, I mean, he
yeah,
got
well, back
hurt, but
yeah.
he's still awesome, and look how little he gets paid. So I do love that about the NFL players and kind of how they rally behind each other
Yeah.
with something like this, because they do, like you said, they have to understand at this level that it's not amateur sports like in college anymore. It's a business too. So hey, they've got to take that side of it and say, look, this is a way to help push our other guys forward to make sure that they're getting what they're worth. Because I mean, these guys are putting their body on the line week in, week out, day in, day out at practice, the OTAs, all that good stuff.
Yeah. So I think that's another piece that people, when they get up there and yell at everybody for how could this happen and they want to make a viral clip. It's like, well, there's a lot of moving parts, and at the end of the day, there were players having Tyreek Hill and CMC were having his literally historic years, and Mahomes was
Historic
having
years, yeah,
a down year by his standards. A
right.
down year for him is just outside the top 5. So, which reflected in the voting in that, like, so I just found it very interesting that the people that finished ahead of him at the time the voting ended were Lamar and CMC, and Tyreek Hill obviously got hurt on the 11th. Before that, he was having a massive year, you know. So the
Insane.
people the people that were, you know, ahead of him, all makes sense now, does it not? I mean, is there anything that you're surprised here? Did this go differently than you thought? Did you think I was going to get up here and be like, "Look at this, he stinks. He shouldn't have even been in the top 4." No, it was just like, wow, the pieces here all fall into place.
I think I was more hopeful that that's what you were getting up here to say was, Mahomes stinks. What's he doing even in the top 4? Then it's real easy just to say, hey, 3, 3 rings. Yeah.
Right.
But no, I mean, when you really look at it and kind of take everything into consideration as far as big picture goes, when you consider the time frame that voting goes, when you consider, hey, the negotiation chip piece, and then also again, just going back to the relativity, the expectations. Like again, Tyreek was having a career year. CMC, how many games in a row did he score a touchdown?
It was 16 or 17 in a row.
Unbelievable, and stuff like that. It's like, hey, yes, you're Mahomes, you're great, top notch, but also it's in a way, hey, I personally, if it was my votes, like if I see somebody like CMC scoring 16 games in a row and somebody else is performing below expectation, I'm going to be inclined to vote for the guy that's doing something historic. It just gives that little bit more to me to say, hey, I'm going to put you as number 1 because this has never been done before, and that to me deserves to be rewarded or at least kind of given a shout out to.
Yeah. I mean, this is the only thing where the players really have a voice is to combat the AP MVP of all these beat writers and stuff, you know?
Yeah,
So
the Twitter quarterbacks, the armchair quarterbacks,
there you
like
go.
myself. Yeah,
That's all I had, man. That was a pretty nice presentation, wasn't
yeah, it was outstanding. I was impressed. Gosh, I'd vote you number 1 for presentation skills alone. PowerPoint.
it? I do these all like I make all these graphics on like memes. I have this little app that I use and I put all this stuff together. I'm like, now that I figured out how to work them, I think I'm going to do more just like, let me explain this without Cowherd or Nick Wright or Stephen A yelling at you without stats that really look at the entire picture. Be like, you know,
Yeah, but then you'll
yeah,
still get guys like me yelling at you on Twitter.
well,
So
yeah, that's what we
can't
want.
can't avoid that. Yeah.
Now, this does not mean within the next few months that I will not post or say uh, that I hope the Chiefs lose every game because
Can't.
I 100% support that. But
Yeah.
it does not mean that I do not respect Patrick Mahomes and how good he is, how good the
Right.
Chiefs are. I can
And I
still
think
hate
too,
their guts.
it just comes back to, yeah, just an understanding again. Look at that top 5 list. I just keep looking back at that. Lamar, Christian McCaffrey, Brock Purdy, Tua, Josh Allen, Jalen Hurts, Tyreek Hill. All, I mean, when you hear those names, you automatically think top NFL players. No, I
Yeah,
mean, bottom line. So for me, it's kind of interchangeable, and I really liked that the point that you made about bargaining chip, kind of brotherhood. Look, these
yeah,
guys do kind of look out for each other. They understand that. Look, hey, yes, are they competing? Absolutely, but also they've got families to feed, and they've put their body on the line for all these years. So look, to me, to be ranked, I don't think Mahomes is too beat up by it. I don't think many Chiefs fans would say, hey, you know what is going on? Who's voting this? But
yeah.
maybe a few.
Well, that's the thing. Like you see this and you see it from the NFL Network. And you're like, what? What? And it's
Yeah,
like, no. Let's look deep. Let's dive deep and understand how that happened. That was not. I don't think they were doing that for clickbait. I think it was just people have to understand why this happened. And what it does for the Chiefs, unfortunately, is gives them another chip on their shoulder that they can be like, well, you said we were number 4, and I made the joke of like, in 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 the near future, if they win their 3rd in a row and he wins his 4th, that is going to turn into the picture of like 4 Super Bowl rings or 4 Lombardis where that 4 is over there.
yeah, exactly. Yeah, but that's what
That
we'll
is
change the graphic to 4 Super
somebody will
Bowls.
put a
Yeah.
4X beside it, 4 times Super Bowl champion down here. Nobody steal that because if it happens, I will be making that meme.
Yeah, you'll switch your allegiance to Chiefs. You'll be wearing Chiefs hats for Millie
No,
Goats
never,
shows for a year if the Chiefs win.
never. We'll make
Yeah.
a bet. We'll make it.
Oh, we can have something. I'm sure.
We'll make
You
it
got to
back.
rock a Mahomes jersey to a 49ers game.
God, that would be brutal. One of my friends is a Chiefs fan. That would be terrible. One
Is
of
his
our
name
buddies
Jens
played for the Chiefs.
Christensen? Yeah.
No, no, I have another Chiefs. One of my family members too, but one of our buddies played with the Chiefs for a year.
Oh, that's awesome.
Yeah, he played with Mahomes his last year, or his last year in the league. He played. He went over there with the Chiefs. That's the one they lost. Of course it
Oh,
was.
yeah, that was a
So,
tough year. Yeah, no,
oh,
it's
I
a neat
hate that
guy.
for you, buddy. I
What's that?
absolutely hate it for you.
Oh, it was tough. I mean, losing the Bengals. I was at the game that year too, and it was tough. The Bengals fans do travel well. I will say. I'll at least give them that. Bills fans are great too. You know, and one thing too that I love with the way the Chiefs have really, created the winning culture. Because I mean, in the '90s we were horrible, but Arrowhead's become kind of a destination. I feel for traveling fans. So we do get a good contingent of traveling fans to come see Arrowhead, come check out Kansas City, which I absolutely love giving it to them while they're at Arrowhead and getting blasted.
Well,
So
you have to. That's what you have to do.
yeah, well, I wouldn't be a Chiefs fan otherwise. But this deep dive was excellent. So yeah, whenever we get the AFC West and Chiefs takes on, we'll have to revisit this and maybe widen our scope of, stats, our time
Yeah,
frame.
I love doing stuff like this, man. I just
Oh, this was great.
sit up at night. I'm like, man, let's see if we can make a case for something here, and you just start putting the things together. Well,
Well,
tell
you
the people
got
where they can tell the people where they can find you, man.
Well, I was going to say you got Debbie coming to visit you too soon, so be safe out there.
Oh yeah, thank
I'm sure you'll have plenty of time, well, with the kids and everything, to
you.
put all this together. But yeah, you can find me at Jens Christensen on Twitter, contributor for Rotoballer PGA. So you can find us at Rotoballer PGA as well. I do talk other sports from time to time. But AKA, thank you again for having me on. I really appreciated it and
Thanks for
enjoyed the
jumping in, dude.
conversation. Yeah,
Thanks for jumping
absolutely.
in, man.
Anytime. Love
Uh,
chopping it up with you.
absolutely. We'll do some more satirical stuff at a
Yeah,
later
all the time. Yeah.
date. Everybody be safe out there. If you subscribe to the show and look out for our podcasts and then our videos and us calling video game college football. You can find it anywhere you want to look at, anywhere your podcasts are available. The Millie Goats, type that in on YouTube, Rumble, Instagram, Twitter, TikTok, Twitch. Millie Goats, that's where you find us. And until tomorrow night, everybody just remember that this was a very professional presentation. And if you missed it,
Go Chiefs. Yeah.
go back, watch it, learn, and then be at ease. See you later, everybody.